Okay, so this video is really to give you a couple of tips and tricks, a couple of best practices for facilitators of the playground for entrepreneurs. So the first is, as a facilitator, you need to be very aware that your role is kind of double. You have two roles. So you're both being a coach to these participants and you're also being a moderator. So you need to practically keep everything going, make sure that everybody gets the same time to do their questions, that everybody gets their turn, that feedback is kind of balanced. And you also need to make sure as a coach that the conversation is insightful enough, that it's enough value per minute, that it's constructive, and that people get enough like tips and tricks, insights that they need at that moment. So you're both being a coach, you can share your experience, you can share your insights, your opinion on things, but you're also being a moderator. So you need to maintain the balance between the two, and you need to maintain the quality of the game. Now, the amount of help that the participants need, I find that it's very dependent on the group, on the participants themselves. If you do this game with student entrepreneurs, they tend to need a lot of help. They really need you questioning. They need you to go deeper into the information. They need you to step in with your own insights and experiences and opinions and what you've seen from other projects. Now, when you do this game, I also had a couple of groups that were actually entrepreneurs. They had been entrepreneurs for a long time. They all had their successful businesses, and now they were taking on a new project, and we were playing the game with those projects. So these people were basically coaching themselves. They were giving each other enough insights and enough value per minute, and they didn't really need any intervention at all. So in that sense, the role shifts between being more of a coach or more of a moderator. If that is happening, if the feedback between each other is so valuable that it creates its own, and that it's valuable enough, that it's insightful enough, and they're really building upon each other's experiences, then just let that happen as much as possible. So I would like prefer like the peer feedback happening and you stimulating that rather than intervening too much. And of course you need to be questioning, and of course you need to share your own things as well, but like the peer feedback is really important to get things going and to really build that community as well and get people helping each other. So make sure the conversation is deep enough, insightful enough, that it's valuable enough. You need to really monitor that. And otherwise, as soon as it's kind of becoming too long and too boring or not insightful enough, as people just start to turn off, then let's continue with the next question and let's make it more dynamic. So you need to really keep the balance. Now, about the setup, additional to the instructions, the number of participants on one table is very important to manage. Personally, I would prefer 3 to 4 participants. Then when you do a chess clock with 15 minutes and with 3 participants, you could do a chess clock of 20 minutes. Everybody gets enough insights, everybody gets enough conversation, and it's not too long for people. So you can manage a playing session of about 1.5 to 2 hours. And that's ideal for people to get a real good value, get a real good conversation, and not to be spending too much time. So I find that kind of ideal. Now there's also facilitators, I know they prefer to play it with more people. So they have 6 at the same table. They might be able to learn from each other. You could eventually use like the questions individually as well, but be conscious about how many participants you put on one table and why, and how many attention you want each person to get. Now, sometimes there's occasions of teams with more than one member. If we have a bigger event with several tables in parallel, then I would split them up, so that everybody gets their own experience can share their own experience and what they're doing in their project. Everybody gets new insights and new ideas, and then afterwards with the team they come together, and that's also you might want to facilitate that moment for them to come together and to integrate their experience and to get the right insights out that they want to do something with. Now, this is a tool to stretch up their thinking. So sometimes crazy ideas come out, sometimes like hypothetical situations occur. So that's stretching up their thinking. Not everything that comes up is really something that needs to be done. Afterwards, you can reflect on that and see if you want to adapt some ideas or implement some ideas or just are not relevant. That's a decision you can take afterwards, but that way you can really make it valuable for teams with more than one member and really make it valuable for each of them. Have each of them also participate in the game as such. Now, there's variation that are possible. Usually we split the members of one team up, but once we've had an occasion, and these were Dutch students, and Dutch are famous for being very direct, and these two were very direct with each other, to the level that the coach even said, well, do you guys even talk to each other, or what's happening here? Because they would have very different visions and very different ideas about their project, about their company they were starting. So they were able to really get in tone with each other a lot more through the game, and that was one of their main insights as well. And that really came across when they were playing the game, because then you could see how much they were thinking differently and they could complement each other. They were not fighting, but they were just thinking very differently. And now that they become conscious about it, they could do something about it and see which points they needed to kind of get to a consensus, but also at which points it didn't really make a difference for them to have different opinions, and they could manage their own style within their company. So you can play around with this a little bit to see what's working and to experiment, and it really depends on the participants themselves as well, if they would rather sit at different tables or kind of integrate their vision, both participating in the conversation. So remember that this is a coaching and a conversation tool, so you need to keep the value per minute high, I would say. Now, there's different styles of doing this. I know that some coaches really tend to like a very long conversation, and they keep questioning about the same theme, and they keep questioning, and then the conversation becomes, well, more insightful, but it's a very long process. You also might want to keep it more dynamic. So in that sense, you limit the time a lot more. You either, when you're working with a chess timer, you make the participants very conscious about spending their time and what they want to spend their time on, or you just limit the time per question. So it's 2 minutes per question and then 1 minute of feedback for the other participants, and you're very tight on timekeeping. It really depends on your style and how you want to get this conversation going. There's, well, different answers here, and depending on your goals as a coach with these participants, it depends on how you manage it. If you want it to be more game-like, then you should keep time management like a lot tighter. And if you really want to take a question like as a hook for a better conversation, for more insight, and you think it's a very relevant question to the entrepreneur, then you might want to be a little bit more loose on the timekeeping. So, and of course, very important to keep the conversation open, to spend enough attention on each of the participants, and also allow them to give feedback and give them space to give feedback. Also the participants that might be a bit more quiet. So again, remember this stretches up their thinking. It's a game, and that's a very good thing to start from that perspective, because it creates this parallel world. And in parallel worlds, hypothetical things can happen and crazy ideas can happen. And sometimes unexpected situations occur, like if everything fails, what do you do? Right? Some people say, well, my project is already kind of successful. Well, this is a situation, everything fails. What do you do? Right? So that parallel world can let them come up with new thoughts, new crazy ideas, exchange experiences, what has worked for them, and if the others maybe can apply the same thing or the same idea. So really keep that in mind, that it's stretching up their thinking. It's a parallel world. You're imagining a lot of things that you probably haven't imagined before, and therefore you get new ideas that you might later want to implement. Now, you don't need to implement everything. It's not a universal truth, but it is a way of coming up with new ideas and new solutions and new thoughts and new experiments. So that stretching up of their thinking and that parallel world creates a safe space, and that's what you're facilitating. The safe space for crazy ideas, and then afterwards we'll see which one we implement or what makes sense for us, for the particular project or for the particular entrepreneur.